The snow drifted down slowly that night, soft flakes glowing gold under the warm light spilling from the windows of a tiny tailor shop on the corner of a quiet street. Inside, the air smelled of fabric, thread, and faint traces of lavender soap. A young woman named Clara sat bent over her sewing machine, the rhythmic hum filling the silence around her. Her hands were rough from work, fingers pricked with tiny needle marks, but her touch was gentle, especially when she worked on the little pink coats resting on her table. Those coats weren't for sale. They were for the two small girls sleeping on a blanket near the fireplace, their cheeks rosy from the heat and their hands clutching each other in their dreams. Clara looked at them and smiled softly, her heart tightening with love. Lily and Rose, 3-year-old twins she had found abandoned in a wooden basket at the church steps one freezing winter morning. She remembered how their cries had echoed through the snow, how her arms had wrapped around them instinctively, as though her heart had recognized them before her mind did. The villagers had called her foolish for taking them in, for burdening herself when she had so little. But Clara never saw them as a burden. She saw them as her miracle, her reason to keep breathing, keep sewing, keep hoping. The shop was small but full of warmth. Handmade dresses hung neatly from racks, delicate ribbons tied at their waists. Old wooden shelves held spools of colored thread, reds, golds, creams, and pale pinks. Every corner of the room told a story of perseverance. The storm outside grew harsher, snow tapping softly on the window pane, but Clara didn't stop working. She was finishing the last button on Lily's coat when the power flickered, the light dimming for a moment. She sighed, looked out at the white-covered world beyond the glass, and whispered to herself, "As long as they're safe, I'll be fine." The fire crackled, casting a gentle glow on the sleeping children. Clara rose, wrapped a worn shawl around her shoulders, and crouched beside them. She brushed a loose strand of hair from Rose's forehead and smiled faintly. "You'll never be alone again," she murmured. Her voice trembled with exhaustion and devotion. For a long time she just sat there listening to the snow and the steady breathing of the girls. The world outside might have forgotten her, but here, in this tiny shop filled with thread and hope, Clara had built a family of her own. What she didn't know was that far away, someone else, someone powerful and broken, was searching for what she had already found. 3 years passed, and the world outside Clara's little shop changed. But inside, life was steady, warm, and full of laughter. The once abandoned twins had grown into bright, joyful girls who filled every corner with their energy. Lily loved to sing while Clara sewed, her soft voice echoing like a melody that made even the dullest winter mornings glow. Rose, the quieter one, always sat beside Clara, pretending to stitch with her tiny plastic needle and colorful scraps of fabric. The shop had become more than a place of work. It was their home. Customers adored Clara not only for her skill but for her kindness. She'd sew extra stitches for free, repair torn coats for children whose parents couldn't afford new ones, and always smiled, even when her hands were trembling from exhaustion. The locals often said she had magic in her thread. What they didn't see was how many nights she stayed up late watching over the girls, whispering stories about angels and hope until they fell asleep. One crisp winter afternoon, Clara walked the twins to school through the gently falling snow. The girls wore matching pink coats, the ones she had made when they were babies, now resized and embroidered with little flowers. They held her hands tightly as they skipped along the snowy street, giggling about the snowflakes melting on their noses. People turned to smile at the sight of them, a mother and her daughters, though no papers or bloodlines could ever prove it. But beneath Clara's smile lingered a quiet fear. Every once in a while, when the twins were asleep, she would sit by the window and stare into the snowy distance, her mind wandering back to the night she'd found them. They had been wrapped in a fine silk blanket, too fine for anyone poor. A golden pin, the shape of a lion's crest, had been tucked beside them. She'd hidden it away in a small wooden box beneath her bed, never speaking of it to anyone. It was the only clue to where the girls had come from, and who might one day come for them. That evening, as the snow thickened and Clara closed her shop for the night, a sleek black car passed by the street for the first time in years. Its headlights cut through the white haze, gliding past her humble shop before stopping at the far corner. Inside the car sat a man in a dark coat, his eyes drawn to the flickering light from her window. He couldn't explain why, but something about the warmth inside that little shop tugged at him. Clara didn't notice the car. She was too busy helping Lily and Rose finish their bedtime cocoa, laughing as they tried to blow on the steam. She didn't know that destiny had just found the road back to her door, that the man in the car was holding a memory of 2 lost babies and a regret that had haunted him for years. The next morning, the town was blanketed in white. Clara was busy setting up her shop when the bell above the door chimed softly. She looked up, expecting one of her regulars, but froze when she saw the man standing there. He was tall, dressed in an expensive black coat that still glistened with snowflakes. His presence filled the small shop like a gust of cold air. His eyes, sharp gray and deeply tired, moved slowly around the room, taking in every detail. The fabric rolls stacked neatly, the small sewing table with children's drawings pinned above it, and 2 tiny pink coats hanging by the fire to dry. "Good morning," Clara managed, smoothing her apron. "Can I help you with something?" The man hesitated for a moment before replying, his voice low but heavy with something she couldn't name. "I'm looking for someone. Or something, maybe. I was told there's a seamstress here who's been in town for a few years." Clara nodded cautiously. "That would be me." He studied her for a long moment as though he was searching her face for an answer he wasn't ready to hear. Then his gaze shifted to the 2 little dresses she'd just finished, identical, small, and trimmed with lace. His expression changed, something tightening in his chest. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small golden pin, the same lion's crest Clara had hidden away years ago. Her breath caught. The room seemed to tilt. "Have you ever seen anything like this?" he asked quietly. Clara's heart pounded. The edges of her vision blurred, but she forced herself to remain composed. "It's a beautiful piece," she said softly, trying to steady her voice. "Old, perhaps from a noble family." The man nodded. "It belonged to mine. I lost someone very precious a long time ago. Twin daughters. They were taken from me after their mother passed. I've been searching ever since." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, a rare fracture in the armor of a man who looked like he'd never allowed himself to break. For a moment, Clara couldn't speak. Her mind raced. This can't be happening. The twins' laughter echoed faintly from the back room. They were coloring, singing softly to each other. The sound hit the man like a wave. His head turned toward the noise instinctively, and for the first time a flicker of hope lit his face. "Those voices," he whispered. Clara stepped forward, her trembling hands clutched together. "Please don't," she started, but it was too late. The door to the back room opened, and the twins appeared, smiling shyly, their hair golden in the morning light, their matching pink dresses like reflections of each other. The man froze completely. The world seemed to stop moving. His breath hitched, his eyes filling with tears before he could blink them away. "It's them," he breathed almost to himself. "It's really them." Clara's lips parted, but no words came. In that tiny shop filled with warmth and thread and love, the past she had tried so hard to protect had finally found her, and the future she feared was standing right in front of her. The air in the shop grew heavy, as though the warmth from the fire couldn't quite reach the tension that filled the room. The twins, oblivious to the storm of emotion between the adults, ran to Clara and clung to her dress, giggling. "Mama, look. It's snowing again," one of them said, pointing out the window. The man's eyes widened slightly at that word, "Mama." His throat tightened. He turned his gaze to Clara, his voice barely above a whisper. "They call you their mother?" Clara's lips trembled, but she didn't look away. "I am their mother," she said quietly, her voice fragile yet firm. "In every way that matters." He took a slow step forward, the sound of his shoes crunching against the wooden floor. "You don't understand," he said, struggling to steady his tone. "They're my daughters, my blood. I've spent years searching for them. Years thinking they were gone forever." His eyes flicked toward the twins, softening as he watched them twirl near the window, their laughter echoing like tiny bells. "You can't imagine what it's like to lose your family, to wake up every day with nothing but memories." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You think I can't imagine loss?" she said, her voice shaking. "I found them abandoned in the snow, half frozen, crying for someone who never came. I stayed up nights praying they'd live through the cold. I taught them their first words, their first steps. I sewed their clothes from scraps because I couldn't afford fabric." Her voice broke. "I may not share their blood, but I've given them every beat of my heart." For a long moment, the man didn't respond. The fire crackled softly in the silence. The twins, sensing something strange, turned back toward them. One of them tugged on Clara's dress and asked innocently, "Mama, who's the man?" The man's expression faltered. He knelt down slowly, his eyes meeting the twins', eyes that mirrored his own. "My name is Adrian," he said gently, forcing a small smile. I used to know your mother." The girls tilted their heads, studying him. "You look like us," one of them said, her tone curious but sweet. Adrian let out a shaky breath, smiling faintly. "Yes," he whispered. "I suppose I do." Clara turned away, tears slipping down her cheeks. Every word, every look between them tore her apart. She had known this day might come, that someone somewhere might try to take them away. But seeing it unfold before her eyes was unbearable. "Please," she said softly, her back still turned. "Don't take them from me. They don't know you. They've already lost so much." Adrian stood slowly, his expression conflicted. "I'm not a cruel man," he said, his voice low. "I just want to know them, to be part of their lives again, but I can't pretend they're not mine." He glanced at Clara, his tone softening. "And I can't pretend you haven't been their mother all this time." Clara finally turned toward him, her eyes red but resolute. "Then don't destroy what we've built," she whispered. "If you truly love them, don't make them choose between us." Adrian looked at her, at the small shop filled with the quiet hum of love and warmth, and at the two girls who now stood between them, living proof of both his loss and his redemption. He didn't have an answer. All he knew was that fate had led him back here, but love would decide what happened next. The weeks that followed felt like walking through a fragile dream. Adrian began visiting the shop every few days, never unannounced, always careful not to overstep. The first time he returned, he came with small gifts for the twins, storybooks, ribbons, and a pair of matching dolls that made their eyes light up. Clara watched quietly from behind the counter, unsure whether to smile or cry. Every moment he spent with the girls both warmed and wounded her heart. They adored him instantly. They would wait by the door for his knock, giggling when they heard his footsteps in the snow. Adrian had changed too. The cold, distant businessman who had entered her shop that first day was slowly replaced by a man who laughed, who knelt on the floor to help thread a needle for the twins, who forgot about his expensive watch as he wiped jam off their faces. But each time his eyes met Clara's across the room, there was something deeper there. Guilt, gratitude, and something else neither of them dared to name. One evening, Clara stayed late in the shop after putting the twins to bed. Adrian had stayed too, helping her sort fabric. The quiet between them was heavy but not hostile. The only sounds were the soft clinks of scissors and the whisper of fabric folding. After a long pause, he said quietly, "You've given them everything. I don't know how to repay you." She looked up, her voice low but steady. "You don't owe me anything, just don't take them away." Adrian's expression softened. "I won't," he said, shaking his head. "I promise you I won't hurt them or you." He took a breath, then added, "You don't realize what you've done. You didn't just save them, Clara, you saved me too." Clara blinked, confused. He continued, his voice trembling slightly. "For years I had everything, money, power, status, but I stopped living the day I buried those empty coffins. I thought I'd lost my reason to exist. Then I found this little shop, your warmth, their laughter, and it's like I'm finally home again." The air seemed to hold still. Clara turned away quickly, blinking back tears. "Home," she repeated softly, her heart twisting. "That's all I ever wanted for them." When she finally met his gaze, she saw something raw and unguarded in his eyes. He stepped closer, hesitating, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it could be home for you too." Before she could respond, a small voice interrupted them. "Mama?" Lily stood in the doorway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Rose was right behind her, holding both their dolls. "We couldn't sleep," she murmured. Adrian smiled gently and lifted them into his arms, one on each side. Clara watched as the girls curled against him, small heads resting on his shoulders. For a moment, everything felt whole, impossibly, beautifully whole. Later that night, when the snow had stopped and silence filled the little tailor shop, Clara stood by the window, watching Adrian carry the sleeping twins to their beds. The firelight flickered across his face, softening the hard lines that life had carved there, and for the first time she allowed herself to believe that maybe fate hadn't come to take everything away, but to give something back. Months passed. The shop thrived again, not just with business but with laughter and love. The sign outside now read, "Thread of Grace," by Clara and Adrian. The girls often sat at the counter, helping with ribbons or buttons, proud to tell every customer Mama sews, and Daddy pays for the thread. Sometimes Clara would glance at Adrian and find him already looking at her, his eyes filled with quiet understanding. They never needed to speak the words aloud. They both knew what had been stitched between them. It wasn't just fabric that bound them anymore. It was love, loss, forgiveness, and the miracle of finding family in the most unexpected way.